The internet has a habit of turning complex stories and characters into simple labels. Since Obsession's release and success, many viewers have reduced its protagonist to one of two explanations. She's either a toxic Latina stereotype, or she's meant to represent a mental disorder. Obsession isn't really focused on ethnicity, and it's not really about mental illness either, other than self-esteem issues, confidence, and literal misogyny. It's about obsession itself and what happens when a person becomes consumed by desire, fantasy, and the need to be loved. One of the most common reactions online has been to describe the protagonist as a toxic Latina. At first glance, some viewers might think this is simply an observation about her behavior and ethnic background, but the phrase carries a lot of cultural baggage. For decades, Latina women in the media have been portrayed through a narrow set of stereotypes, more often depicted as fiery, jealous, irrational, and hyper-emotional. Think about how often Latina characters are written as a crazy ex-girlfriend, or the woman whose emotions are treated as a threat rather than a human experience. So when viewers encounter a Latina character who behaves destructively, many immediately interpret her actions through that stereotype, rather than considering her as an individual character. The problem is that obsession is not a Latina trait, neither is jealousy, desperation, or attachment. They're human emotions. By reducing these worldwide emotions to her ethnicity, ignore the deeper themes the film is trying to explore. The second major interpretation is that the idea of the protagonist has bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. This reaction reflects a larger trend in the online culture. Today, audiences often treat fictional characters like diagnostic puzzles. Every emotional outburst becomes a symptom. Every bad decision becomes evidence of a disorder, but real mental illness or portrayals of them are far more complex. Someone being obsessive doesn't automatically mean they have a bipolar disorder. In reality, bipolar disorder involves specific patterns of mood episodes that cannot be accurately diagnosed through a few dramatic scenes in a movie. When audiences casually label characters as bipolar, they often reduce a real mental health condition to a synonym for instability. In doing so, they risk spreading misconceptions about people who live with the disorder. If the film isn't about being a toxic Latina, and it isn't about a mental illness, then what is it about? The film explores what happens when admiration turns into fixation, when attraction becomes dependency, when a person stops seeing someone as a real human being and begins seeing them as a solution to all of their problems. Obsession creates a fantasy, and fantasies are dangerous because they allow us to ignore the reality of a situation. Bear did not see Nikki as a person. He was merely only infatuated with her. He did not know her beyond the surface level. Nikki asked for help when she was trapped in her own body, and he suddenly made it about himself. He didn't bother to even realize that she was still in there, only how it made him feel. That is why a lot of people interpret the movie as a horror from Nikki's perspective. She isn't becoming obsessive because she secretly loved him. Her story says the contrary. She lost all of her autonomy. And Bear's tragedy is that he notices a difference, and that Nikki is still trapped in her own body. He still asks questions like, "So you end up being with me?" instead of, "How do I get her back?" The movie companion flips the perspective. Instead of watching someone force love onto another person emotionally, the movie internalizes it. One character is designed to exist as a romantic companion. Bear is tragic because he still thinks he's a good person. He sees himself as a romantic, sensitive guy. Josh in Companion feels more openly controlling and transactional. Nikki loses herself through supernatural causes. Iris loses herself through technological ownership. But both movies have the same horror, not death or monsters, but being reduced to someone else's fantasy. What makes Obsession so good and unsettling is that Bear's realization that Nikki suddenly became crazy or revealed some kind of hidden crush she had on Bear. It's that he slowly begins to understand that the version of Nikki in front of him is not her, and he did not care. Horror is not an obsession as a romance. It's obsession as erasure. The film suggests that love becomes dangerous when one person stops seeing the other as a complete human being and starts seeing them as something to possess, fix, or shape into an ideal. Bear wanted to be chosen so badly by Nikki. When he finally received that devotion, he struggled to recognize that it no longer meant anything if it wasn't freely given. Nikki's moments of resistance imply that the real her never fully disappeared, and Bear's failure is that he notices those moments, but doesn't immediately let her go. In the end, obsession is less about whether Bear could see Nikki and more about whether he was willing to accept that real love requires another person's autonomy. Once love becomes an obsession, the person you love can disappear while standing right in front of you, at least to my interpretation.